I think we're live. Welcome to what am I calling this? I'm calling this Malazan March Musings, right? Or Malazan March Live. What does that even mean?
Sorry. What does that mean?
Well, it's kind of interesting that we're hosting this little activity on both of our mutual channels. So I could say I have with me a special guest, Donovan Rittenbach, and you can say the
I have
same
with
thing.
me a special guest, Patrick Lugo.
So here we are.
That is fun.
The last day of March. I finally get to do something for my annual tradition of Malazan March. As you know, for the past couple of years, I've been like playing this little social media game, right? Which consists of me doing fan art for what I consider my favorite work of literature these days.
And literature. Is it literature, by the way?
I've heard people call it that. So, and they seem much smarter than I am. So,
okay.
I'm willing to go for it. Besides, it makes me sound smart, so that'll work too.
Nice.
But,
yeah, you were the one that got me into Malazan. You kept insisting that I read it. That was that 4 or 5 years ago at least?
Yeah, it seems something like that.
And it was so worth it. Such an epic, awesome world.
Is that how you would describe it? Like, how would you describe it to someone who, knows fantasy from, say, Lord of the Rings or Wheel of Time most recently?
Yeah, wow. I would say that Malazan Book of the Fallen is like Lord of the Rings times 24%. I mean, times 24. No, what would I say? It's something crazy because it's, they started out playing role-playing the game as a D&D adventure, and then it evolved, but there's just so many interesting races, such a phenomenal mythology. Like, it's just so deep. The characters, it's very character driven. Find yourself falling in love with a lot of the characters, but it's very much a D&D world. But when you start throwing in things like the Kachane Shamal and the Marant munitions and all these crazy things like, Neanderthals that are 400,000 years old. And yeah, it totally goes way, way beyond the D&D world.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing I love is like, I was just thinking about that. Like, it has a race that kind of maps onto elves, right? So it's a little bit D&D-ish that way, but the closest thing it has to, say, dwarves are, the undead Neanderthal warriors, and that's only because they're short, They don't even have faces, much less beards, They're just like...
Yeah, there aren't really any dwarves, right? I mean, there's a lot
not
of
in the context, not in the sense of like, bearded, short, squat, warrior race, nor is there like a Tyrion Lannister that I can think of.
Interesting. Yeah, there's basically 2 races of elves. Is that right? The dark and the light?
It turns out that there are 3, right?
Oh, really?
And so the name that the author uses is called the Teist, right? So there's like the Teist Andi, which are the dark. They represent darkness, the complete blackness, right? They have black skins. And ironically, I've never drawn a Teist Andi because when I do fan art, I try and do stuff that isn't already out there. And, one of the main characters in the book series, right, is Animander Rake, and he's like the king of the Teist Andi, and he's like 7 foot tall, black skin with flowing white hair and gigantic sword, And then they have the Teist Leosin, which are like the opposite. They're white, so they all represent light and purity. Not really purity so much as like fundamentalism, I guess. And then there's the Teist Idor. I've been learning how to pronounce these things now.
Oh, really?
just like listening to interviews with the author and seeing how he pronounces them and why has been kind of fun. Anyway, so then the Idor are like the in between. They're the shadow people, I guess.
Yeah.
And I could share with you
Let's see some artwork.
Some examples of one of those characters. So let me see how I can do that easily. I'll
How long
go
have you been
here.
drawing? How long have you been drawing now? I mean, doing these
Like
illustrations.
the fan art. Oh man, I don't, I think the first piece of Malazan fan art that I worked on was maybe around 2013 or something.
Wow.
Because it was just, I
Yeah.
remember like on being on the quest to find an audiobook series that was on par with Game of Thrones, and I
Yeah.
found it here. So let's see if oh, there we go. So this is an example. I mean, you're not going to see many details, right? Because this is an atmospheric shot. But let me ask you: does this scene jog any memories for you?
Yeah, the guy's troll is going through this crazy snow scene, right? Where he's being hunted by, is that a diverse?
They are something. I think they were called the Jack, and so they
Oh
could
yeah.
be right. So diverse, right? Diverse are a race of shape-changing people. Contrary to a werewolf, right? These guys could be considered werewolves in the sense that they turn into wolves. But the unique twist with the Jack is that one individual turns into multiple wolves at one time. So you don't just turn into a werewolf, you turn into a pack of wolves,
Which is
which
sweet.
yeah, which is so unique and amazing, the potential. So yes.
And he's in a
So
big fight.
exactly. So let me see if I can jog your memory with another scene while I have your attention.
Sister Dawn. I mean, this painting has evolved so much over the years, gotten so
Yeah,
much more detail, like the trees and stuff. Love these flames.
yeah, it's true. This is the first piece of fan art that I really like committed to, and I've returned to it a couple of times and just added more details and changed certain things. So it's this one that I don't know. I have a personal appreciation for it,
Yeah,
and
and let's see, you actually read all 10 books like 4 or 5 times. Is that
yes,
right? The audiobooks?
yes, it's true. I mean, that's the beauty of the audiobooks, and it's also one of the things that
I mean, they're 1,000 pages each, so that's like somewhere around 40 or 50,000
yeah, I mean, I think of them in hours. Like each one is a good at
for it.
least 20 to 40, anywhere from 20 to 40 hours, and you know, that's a pretty huge commitment.
Who was Sister Dawn? I'm
So
trying to.
Sister Dawn is like an immortal version of the race of the Tist Idor. And so she's considered a goddess of evil. Even though she represents the dawn, she's considered a goddess of evil for the race of shadow beings that we saw in Troll Sangar in the previous image.
Gotcha.
So she's a dragon also. So there's that. But
What does she
there's
have a
one thing.
warren? Does she have a
Well,
warren or a house affiliation with a power
I
like
mean,
Shadow?
fire,
Or,
light, well, dawn. So it has to. It's. I think she represents the transition between from shadow to dawn. All right, the pre-light. Like this race of beings. Like when I worked on this project on that character, she was conceived of as part of a triptych, right? So she was dawn. There was shadow, and then there was another one who was dapple, right? The dapple sunlight that you see in a forest, because this race of people, they're forest dwellers. So I've gotten only so far as Sister Dawn in this case. So she's
Cool.
often represented by, being blazing white light and, the light of dawn, right? And flames. But there's one particular thing about this piece of artwork that I'm hoping to share with you and there's no easy way to do it, but then to just jump on Google and show it. So let me just try that. Oh, no, that's the wrong button. I'll get to, okay, let me try that one more time. Live sharing, right? That's what this is all about. So I'm going to share another screen to see if you can see that there, I should have prepared better for these kind of visual aids, but we do what we
We talked
can.
about doing this yesterday, so.
I know, right? So anyway, this is the point, is that I based that Sister Dawn character on the proportions of
Venus de
who's,
Milo.
yes, exactly. So if
Goddess of beauty.
so I
Only
kind
you
of,
her arms.
right, exactly. So I kind of built the proportion. That's like one of the things I love to do with these kind of projects, right? Is to be a little bit to play around, playful. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, you're pretty
So now,
playful.
having seen that Google search, there's can you see it there,
Yeah, I can see it more. It's
Cool.
kind of
Well,
small.
it's, yeah, I mean, it was just
Well, on
really,
my screen anyways, I'm kind of.
I mean, what I used was that body
Yeah,
posture, right, in the
yeah.
specific proportions, because why not?
Why
But
not?
here, let's move on to another piece.
Yeah.
Here we go. Does this scene remind you of anything?
Harlow.
Yes.
The
I guess I'm giving you hints with the subtitles, but that's
which is
okay.
super helpful.
So do you remember his storyline? He's from one of the later books, but
And Harlow is not, was he one of the three magicians though at the beginning? That's
no,
gets
well,
trapped
okay,
in the
so I was
twig?
reading about that. That is Harlock is who you're thinking
Oh,
of.
okay.
And one thing that I think infuriates a lot of people who I've heard is that the author uses names that sound the same.
Yeah.
Harlock, oh, it's Hairlock, Harlow, and there's
Yeah.
multiple characters named Harlow. And I remember when I first read that, I had some trouble with that. But I kind of see a little bit of a logic in the sense of thematic resonances, but also how I don't know. Sometimes I think he's doing that on purpose because some characters are so long lived that their names have already entered into legend and have, as a result, become part of the colloquialisms of the area.
Yeah.
Or cities have been named after these characters, on their founding.
So Harlow is what?
So Harlow is the son of another character, right? He's like an unwanted child that's ultimately sold off to the mines. And while, diving, because he's small, he's sent really deep, deep into the mines. And while he's there, he encounters one of the undead Neanderthals that we were just talking about. And
Yeah. Is this the Ototero mines?
it is not. It is a different set of mines, right?
Okay.
So, the giveaway is the color scheme, right? So Ototero, which for those who
Would
don't
be
know, right,
red.
that's
Right?
red, and that's like anti-magic metal. And then so he's actually in a mine outside of Darujistan, right, which is the city of blue fire. And so that lantern that he's using is using the same blue gas that the whole city uses to light its streets. And so he's using it to go down deep, deep into the mines where he's found this undead Neanderthal.
Who's just been hanging out for a really long time, right?
Right. And he ends up giving him a set of replacement legs because he finds some old petrified bones. So really sweet. and
Yeah.
also dark at the same time.
Yeah, right. And there's this one of the things I love about these Neanderthals is that kind of embodiment of like, here's somebody who's lived for 400,000 years. They've seen it all. They really don't have much to live for other than to hunt down their mortal enemies, right? The
Right. The Jagot,
Jagart.
which I have done, right? Jag Hut or something like that, or like that.
Yeah,
I have done a couple of illustrations of, oh, here's another undead Neanderthal with their stone sword.
to learn I mass.
Malani Mas, they are called.
I
But
like that. That's cool.
yeah,
The
I could.
necromancer. We're gonna come back to that one.
Oh yeah, totally. I'm just randomly scrolling for. Nope, I don't have that image here,
Okay.
but I could probably find it elsewhere. But yeah, the Jag Huts are like, they look like your classic orc, right? They are
They're pretty big.
usually, yeah, taller
They're
than
huge.
humans, anywhere from 6 to 8 feet. They had the tusks, and they were usually either green or sometimes they were blue.
Trying to see. There's like a really classic image. Let's see. Can I share?
Yes, please do.
Do I just go add to
You share
screen?
school. I'll stop this share, and then you can just share screen.
Let's see. Where
Hit
is
the
it at?
share button. It's at right. It should be right at the bottom of this, right next to settings, at the bottom of the.
Okay.
Look at that. We got one like. That's awesome.
Really? That's
Yeah.
funny. Sweet.
I mean, I did let the folks over at the various Malazan boards, let them know that I was going to try this. So there's still a bunch of other artwork that I'm hoping to put into place. I just got to figure out how.
Is it gonna let me do it? I might have to quit and quick pop in. So while I apparently, in order to share my screen, I'm gonna have to just quick cut out for a second, but I'm gonna send you the link.
Awesome.
So you can show the races maybe a little bit, and I'll be
That's a great idea. Where let's,
right back. Did you get them? Here they're in
oh
private.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can find that. Okay, well you oh,
Here
there
we
it
go.
is.
I'll be right back.
Yes. In the meantime, let's see if I could share some examples. Now, this is not my fan art, so let me just be really quick to point that out. But this has been a great resource, and I've contributed to this resource, adding some of my own fan art. But going from left to right, I could name them from memory, right? So we have the Talanai Mass. You have your human next to that. Standing next to them is what's called a trell, so, or sometimes a fen. They're kind of like ogres. Shorter next to them are the Moranth, followed by the Bargast. Who else? We have the
Okay.
there we are. So I got stuck with Bargast. I'm trying to remember who the dudes are in the center.
The Bargast.
There's the Bargast. There's okay.
They
So far,
really
I've got,
reminded me of like orcs, like in Lord of the Rings. Aren't they pretty tough dudes?
they
Like,
are. They're like a hardcore warrior race, So they're like humans, but a little bit more bulked up because they've been over the course of their history. They've been, interbreeding with some of these other, races, species, right?
yeah.
Right. So then after the Barghest, you have the Fulcral Assail, the crazy
Ooh,
white creatures that are multi-jointed and
Yeah, those guys are the fulcral assail are so trippy.
yeah. And then you
Okay.
have the three race of Edor, I mean the three race of Teist, right? The
Yeah.
light, shadow, and dark. And then they're followed by the Jaghut. This one's a little pale green. And then the Thelomen Toblikai, which are the Malazan equivalent to like giants. You look at how much taller they are, 9 feet compared to your 5.5 to 6 foot tall human.
But they're not as big as the Kachin Jamal, the big dinosaur guy with the sword. I don't, it's kind of funny, right? Because their arms, their hands are like swords,
Yes.
right? So how do you eat your food? Whatever, small detail.
I know. Well, they just like a crocodile would, they
Right.
just chomp it up. But yes, okay. So speaking of the Conchain Jamal, right? There was a scene that one. So okay, so in book 3, we're treated to undead versions of these dinosaurs with swords for hands, right? And there's epic battles that happen with them in the book Memories of Ice, which is probably my favorite
Mm.
of the series. But
Because that's kind of the origin of, I mean, it goes back really far to the beginning of the Tatlani Mass, doesn't it?
yeah, I mean its prologue begins like 30,000 years ago or something like that, right?
Yeah.
With the prehistory kind of very personal war, and then that war spills out into like the modern timeline of the series. But
Yeah, I remember the first time the Kachin Shamal show up. It's kind, isn't it like around these the Necromancer's wagon?
yes, yes,
Yeah,
that's one of the reasons why I was so inspired to draw this piece, because despite the fact that these necromancers are terrifying, right, and they're badass, they are also freaking hilarious,
yeah.
you know. And
The
so,
comedy.
they're traveling in a wagon train with a bunch of other like merchants, and it gets attacked by these dinosaurs with swords for hands, right? But because they're necromancers, they're able to just not only defeat them, but then use those corpses to rebuild their wagon.
Yeah, a dark sense of humor for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. So when I was thinking about drawing it, I definitely just had that. How can I carry that humor over? So I just ultimately had to put their poor beleaguered manservant, their butler. I was like, oh well, they'll make a nice seat for him, and the seat will just happen to be the jaws of the freaking dinosaur that just tried to kill them all. And I just thought that was like the perfect kind of humor that would be played out visually.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So, like, since we're kind of remembering back over time, what I know we're not really focusing on an agenda necessarily, but could I ask you what your favorite character? Do you have a favorite character? I mean, we talk a lot about Karsa Orlong.
Carter Orlong was, a character that I was really not into when he was first introduced. So it's ironic that I've really come to
Huh.
appreciate him. And also, the newest sequel to this book series is kind of based around him. But Troll Sangar, the spear wielding dude, he was like
Badass.
yeah,
Yeah.
he was ultimately revealed to be like the Knight of Shadows, and he was pretty cool because he was so damn empathetic.
Hmm.
Like over the course of the series, you just kept seeing, even though he was willing to question authority, and especially the authority of his younger brother, who had claimed power because
Hmm.
he accidentally became unkillable. You remember him, right, with all the coins that were
Yeah.
his flesh.
That and that's kind of actually an inspiration in some of my short stories that I have these goblins. They have these things called farsigs that are coins that get them into the undead world, into the world, into Arsala, which is the underworld, but all their coins are like buried in their skin. Their payment to the afterlife. So, but I totally ripped that off from Malazan Book of the Fallen.
Confession, true life confessions of a writer.
Let's see. Now I can do it. I bet I can. Hopefully, I can share the screen for a second.
Yeah, let's do it.
Come on. Can it do it? I can't believe that computers are your friend. StreamYard 1, 2. Oh my God. Okay. It keeps on. It's the gift that keeps on giving. Yay, tech. Okay, so let's just skip that for the time being, because looks like it logged me in on the wrong browser, and now I have to restart that. I'm gonna do this. I got
Oh, we lost Donovan. Oh wait, he's coming back.
back. The techno
Yeah.
mage is back. All right, so
Excellent.
let's try this again. Karsa or Long, because I was going into the Malazan wiki, which is totally awesome, to grab some additional kind of media assets to show our audience.
Mm-hmm.
They know what the hell we're talking about. Okay.
Oh, we've gone recursive now.
Okay, are we back to normal?
Yeah, I can see your screen. Let's do let's see it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Karsa.
it's always interesting how like so many people love this character. He's such a like
Conan the Barbarian type ish.
exactly. That's such like it really. I mean, he is like kind of. He starts off kind of as like an avatar of toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
And then over the course of of the story, he actually is forced to confront the consequences of his toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
But
his big huge stone sword, that's kind of a key thing.
mm-hmm.
Okay, so then the other one was, what was his name? How do you spell it?
Who are we talking about? Trull, Trul?
No, the guy, the spear master dude.
Yeah, I have
That troll.
Trull.
See what they got any. Look at that. There's Patrick's
Yeah.
artwork. Yeah, and his.
There's another one. If you swing back one, you'll see him again. It was another. So this one I drew in the dark. It was like a little experiment where I was late at night, just like sketching around with a dry magic marker.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's rare, there's so many magical swords in fantasy, and it's so rare to find a character that opts not to use a sword.
Yeah.
But
His
holds his
pretty
own,
awesome. Yeah.
Holds his own as a spearman. There's kind of a special thing about that.
And his trippy ass, like, psycho brother who's got the coins and is embedded in his flesh.
Yeah, I had another version of him that I drew myself, but unfortunately I'm not able to like find a way to upload them just yet.
Okay.
Or at least I was, I should have been prepared, but I assumed that I'd be able to just share a JPEG on StreamYard, but I'm
Okay, so
it online first.
who else do you really like?
One of my favorite characters. Okay, I could show you her. I always forget. Okay, so this character started out as a villain, and she came onto the scene to follow one of the protagonists. Do you remember the character Kalam Mekar, who was like the ultra badass big assassin that everyone was scared of?
Yeah.
And so she was sent in to clean up his messes. And there she is. Her name is Lestara Yeel, right? And she's part of a group called the Red Blades, who are like fanatically loyal to the occupying empire, the Malazan Empire. She starts off as what I consider a villain, and over the course of the series, she just gets so much more sympathetic, and you get to witness firsthand the consequences of her villainy, and then you start to sympathize with her.
Mm-hmm.
And then added to that, it turns out that she is also like a servant of the cult of shadows, and she's what's called a shadow dancer, right? Which to me,
It's an awesome
brings
name.
to mind all sorts of images of kung fu, knife
Yeah.
fighting. And she turns out to be an incredible badass, and I have such fond memories of this, this woman described with like onyx skin and facial tattoos. I always imagined if I was to cast her in a movie, I would cast like Serena Williams,
Yeah.
Someone who just had so much, like, clearly was like such a strong woman, but totally graceful in movements,
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and so just the fact that she goes through this whole like tragic arc, and the fact that I hated her. She's a villain from the beginning, and then slowly to find myself coming to sympathize and then empathize and then just root for this one character. I mean, that's
Yeah.
almost like a microcosm of what the books do. Do you remember
Yeah.
this?
Karsa starts out, he's a jerk, and then you're kind of like, he evolves though.
Mm-hmm. How about this guy? Do you remember this scene?
Yeah, isn't this is this just after he gets like ascends kind of?
This is
Or is
another.
this the
Okay,
moment that
this was
of
another.
his
This is
ascension?
also from the book Memories of Ice, right? So this was one of the other caravan guards, Gruntle, who ends up becoming the mortal sword of like the new god of war, the Tiger of Summer, and
The old god of war being a boar, right? Who
exactly
gets killed, Fena.
right, exactly. And so there's an epic. So during one of the epic siege battles where like, the invading army just breaks through and chaos ensues, and it just becomes like, you know, street for street combat, and he and his little battalion, his legion, right? Trake's Legion, it ends up being called, ends up taking a small tenement building, and they just fight floor by floor, filling up the building with the dead, and just until they make it to the roof, totally horrifying scene, but
Yeah.
what a potent image. Because then in the next morning, when our heroes, the Marines, show up, they see this one building that has a literal ramp to the roof just made of all the dead corpses, and windows filled with all of these, with all of the invading soldiers, and our guy Gruntle still at the top of the roof, and
Kind of like in that looks like the death dealer.
yeah, and I he's a character I also return to a bunch of times, and I've been accused of making him look a lot like Wolverine,
Yeah,
because
he does look like.
it's a weird thing, because in the book they talk about how much, like, being possessed by the god of war, he starts looking like a giant cat. He gets the tiger stripes in his arms.
Mm.
He gets the eyes that look like jungle cats. But then, so when I draw him, I'm always thinking of how to how to make his hair look like the tiger's ears.
Mm.
Which I wonder if Dave Cockrum was doing the same thing when he designed the original Wolverine back in 1977 or something.
Mm.
but yeah, it's kind of a fun thing. It's definitely a character I want to come back to, right? Like I've seen such amazing professional, renditions, professional, like, officially published versions of the character, which
Yeah.
are amazing, but I still want to take my shot and try my hand at like that specific character as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
Love the colors and
again,
how this has evolved as a painting, There's so much the purples and reds and stuff. Because
yeah.
it's been epic. Let's see. There was sorry, I cut you off. What were you about
No,
to
no,
say?
go ahead.
Um all right, so the other thing I think that we both agreed that we love about the Malazan Book of the Fallen is its world, not only its mythology and its world building, but how those kind of come together, like in the Warrens, and how the Warrens give these different character, like archetypes, kind of the tarot archetypes, like from the deck of dragons, for example, right?
Yeah,
That we
that's a whole other facet to the book series that's just, it's like a whole other project waiting to happen, right?
Yeah,
We have the deck of dragons, which work like kind of like a tarot deck, or a deck of divination. And then it also maps what's called the Warrens, right? And so you're a fan of Brandon Sanderson's writing, and a lot of
yep,
people talk about how his writing uses like hard magic systems, you
yeah,
know. And then in contrast, the Malazan kind of uses, I guess, a soft magic system in that they never fully define how the magic works, but they just give different examples, like this one right here, a map of the Warrens that show how each one represents like a different element or a different concept.
yeah. That's really a key to the world. Like there's the Barghast Warren. That's interesting. So they're kind of like little interdimensional pockets that you can travel between, right? Amtos
Right.
Thalak,
Right.
which is where the Jagat come from, right? You can travel
Somewhat,
into
there are
something.
there's some really awesome explainer videos on YouTube. There was even one explainer video on YouTube that was so comprehensive it inspired me to do a work of art on it, where I drew the whole like diagram of how the Warrens work, and that they are both like a separate universe or a separate plane of existence, as well as being like a power source,
Mm,
as well as being like the metaphorical bloodstream of another deity within the whole universe, right?
mm.
They have these like tiers that go from, your basic whatever, an insect works its way up to human, goes past human to these other like ascended people, and then up to gods and elder gods.
Yeah.
And then so like these Warrens are like kind of part of that system, right? People can draw magic from it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. He doesn't just go with the kind of standard five elements, right? That there's kind of elements of water, but then there's ice as a kind of state of that kind of
Yes,
element.
exactly. I mean, like there's a distinction between fire and light. And then there's
Yeah,
also a distinction between like elder light and like modern light. Like so it goes in a bunch of different interesting directions.
yeah. It's definitely epic. Looks like we got sort of, I don't know that that helps.
Oh, I haven't seen that particular mapping of it, but yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just that sense of, because one of the things that happens over the course of the series is that the Warrens become corrupted, right? And the gaps in between those Warrens become like an issue, or like the thing which separates those gaps
Yeah.
become uh
Degraded or
they become what you call it, like
corrupted.
sick.
It's like, yeah. Another story. I mean, there's so many great stories in it, but I really like the idea of the Tragard Trade Guild. Like
Right.
they're
Yes.
like an interdimensional like courier service traveling through
Delivery
the
service.
Warrens.
Exactly. Yeah. Like they're specifically hired to travel through these dimensions at an extremely high
Pay
price.
rate to deliver supplies and save the day. Yeah,
Yeah. And then there's like, and the beauty of the book series, that it's so unlike Lord of the Rings, in the sense of like the Lord of the Rings is like a beginning, middle, and end. You get from point A to point Z. But with the Malazan Book of the Fallen, it's more like a wheel. And so there are like these, book one connects more closely to book three, book two connects to book four, and then they all connect on book five. No, book five is a completely new setting, and then on book six they start connecting, right? So it's like this. So like there are threads that connect them, there are events that connect them, but then there are specific times when they just like the author will zoom in on a specific event or a specific chunk. Like there's a specific adventures with the trade guild, and we get to go journey with them for a while and have crazy adventures.
yeah. We can mention his name, Stephen Erikson, for the SEO. Maybe YouTube will pick up the
Yeah,
Stephen
I mean, Stephen
Erikson in
Erikson, amazing author, and then just to hear like the thought process of the thinking behind what he's trying to convey in his writing, and it's just like it's just amazing stuff.
So here, this will be a good one to add to the stream. So for those who don't know, this is like the epicness of the the story, right? Totally dwarfs. I mean, Wheel of Time, I think made it up to 12 or 13. It had to be the last 3 or 4 were finished off by Brandon Sanderson, but not only does he totally blow away Game of Thrones and Wheel of Time and Lord of the Rings in terms of volume of writing, but like he sticks to it and he like you don't get left hanging and it has a point, right?
He finishes it. It's a complete series, and it's like I say, I've read it, a half dozen times. It's so rereadable. It's so deep. They're so like there are characters that are just show up for one scene, and they get their face bitten off by a horse, and then 2 books later, that character gets his own redemption arc. And he's
Mm-hmm.
he's then known as Brokeface. But this is a book that's not for the faint of heart. This is not about hobbits having, second breakfasts. There's, this book kind of, borders on like horror many times.
Yeah.
And like the horse biting one's face off is really just the tip of an iceberg of like, you know, violence and horror, bloodshed, gore, that the writer doesn't flinch from. He just puts you right there, and you have to, face the fact that this is happening.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen reviews where people stop reading for that exact reason.
Interesting bunch
But
of
it's
wimps.
well, I mean, the payoff, right? Because he really does look at like the consequences of that violence. And it's not just like the voyeuristic quality of like watching it and being thrilled by the ultra violence. It's like, you kind of are made to see it from both sides most of the time. So
Yeah.
you know So even someone like Karsa Orlong, right, who's ostensibly a hero for many, you know, he does some egregious things. He's he's not a nice guy, right? He starts a war party to go and attack his neighboring villages just to like up his reputation, only to find out that it was all based on the BS that he had absorbed from his own grandfather, like who was just bragging and boasting about the rest of the world. And then he goes out and finds the hard lessons of the rest of the world. And then the whole thing, right? He's a giant, but the way the book is written, you don't really know that.
Mm-hmm.
And he starts his quest because he's going to go out and kill the children. And so for a good chunk of the book, you're thinking, oh my God, this is some crazy dude who's going to go hunt kids,
Mm-hmm.
until you realize that he gets to the village, to the children's village, and that's your normal sized town. And he's
Yeah.
actually a 9-foot tall giant on a 9-foot horse, or 15-foot horse. I don't know.
Yeah. It's
But
huge.
and then so all of a sudden you just start seeing like those different switch arounds. I don't know. It goes on, and then it's just those images.
Yeah. I think another thing that sticks out for me is how detailed Stephen Erikson's understanding of combat is. Like he really understands like large scale armies and how they would be deployed, as well as small scale stuff. And he runs the whole shebang from the Moranth musicians. That's funny.
Yeah.
The Moranth munitions, these like insect guys dropping bombs and explosives on people, to weaponized magic, to like it just takes something that you don't really see any other series really try to integrate, right? That modern technology with the magic. And then
Yes. And then
yeah.
also he does it down because the guy fences. So he'll do it also on the small scale when it comes to like depicting a fight scene.
Hmm.
Do you remember this one? Here we have Roulade covered in coins fighting
Regards the brother, dude. Oh
right,
yeah.
fighting Bryce Beddick, who's the
He's
like
pretty badass.
the king's champion.
Yeah.
Um yeah. Here's an unfinished piece, right? That I really would love to come back to, just because of the potential of really like what I would love to do is design the coin and
Hmm.
then digitally make sure that like all of the coins like wrap around the body and just really like capture that, the glint and the whole thing of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But once again, and then the sword scenes are just so inspiring. So here we have one of the maps. This is not my artwork, but just an example of how thought out
Can
the
you zoom in
world.
on that at all?
Let's see.
Cool. Where's
So
where,
this is
where do
here
we
we
start?
have Malaz Isle, which is where
Is that where the Empress hangs out?
the actual traditional capital at the beginning of the story is a city called Unta, which is a little bit further in. I'm not sure, somewhere in here. I'm not remembering exactly, but this is where the empire gets its origins. So even though it's not like the capital of the story, it is where everything starts.
Where was Darujistan?
So the Rujistan is on another continent.
Okay. Genebacus?
That's the continent
Yeah.
upon which
Yeah, they just so geeked out on this, man. It was
that's the thing. I
Rulad
mean, it's just such. Can you imagine, like if they did an open world version of this, a la The Witcher or something?
or Elden Ring, because this is more Elden Ring level of holy cowabunga, I think. I mean, totally epic. So we got 10 minutes.
All right, so here's another unfinished piece. There's my take on Karsa Orlong. That's fairly recent.
Can get it to rotate.
Let's see.
Yeah.
I'm unable to, alas, because I'm just previewing it.
Okay.
Here's another unfinished piece. Do you remember the wolves and all of the undead wolves and wolf spirits that play such a significant role in the
Yeah, I
story
mean,
as well?
there's, it's been a while since I've read it, and there's just so much.
Right? Well, there's like a whole sequence where there's like, you know how we were talking about the god of war
Yeah.
starts off as a boar, and then the tiger shows up. But then over the course of the story, there's a war over who gets to be the god of war. And and that includes, the wolves, the tigers, the boars, and the humans. So it's just
Yeah, that little kid, I'm trying to remember. That's not Silver Fox, is it?
no, it's a character named Setok who is a she. I think she gets like when the Barghast are raiding, her family gets killed.
Hmm.
She then is adopted and raised by wolves. Oh, she's taken in by wolves and then raised from childhood to adulthood by Barghast,
Yeah.
and then she's adopted by the wolves of war, maybe they're called.
Hmm. Let's see. The other thing that I really liked in terms of the arc of the whole book is what he does with the crippled god. How the crippled god starts out as this like super kind of creepy dude sitting in a tent, and you're just like, and for it to become such a major part of the story, I think is pretty awesome. And it's
Yeah.
a good reflection of, like when you think about Christ as the tortured one, or Prometheus, like this being that who suffers and is, like everyone else, it just makes them more identifiable, I think. Like,
Hmm.
you're kind of like, oh, yay, there's somebody who feels my pain. They're not just all gods that are like living these ideal lives. There's some pain and suffering there. And yeah, that identification I think is really interesting. For me, anyways.
Yeah.
The final book being all about the crippled god.
I know. It's just like don't want to necessarily give spoilers, but definitely want people to have a look see.
Yeah, for sure. And then, oh yeah, of course, floating islands. What were those called again?
Right, that were like Moonspawn or the Sky Keeps, they were called.
Yeah.
So here's a little something else I'd like to share as
Cool.
we bring this to a close. These are some comic layouts that I once did, imagining how you can compress these epic stories into, tight visuals, because so many characters, so many scenes, so much interesting stuff. I could spend hours just drawing a specific scene, but the thought of like, oh, what would it be like in comics form? Who would I focus on? What would it look like? Them relating to each other. And so
Yeah.
this is something I always have in the back of my mind for that day when I have nothing else to work on.
Oh man, looks awesome. Well, Malazan Book of the Fallen, Malazan March. It was an awesome world. It certainly inspired me, and I can't wait to go back to it. Is that Karsa?
No, this
Who is
is
that?
this
Sorry.
is the color version of Lestar Yield, who I was
Okay.
telling you about earlier.
Yeah. Cleaning
And
up Kalam's messes.
yes, yes, and ultimately becoming an amazing badass over the course of the series. She's someone. She's another
Shadow.
character who I'd like to come back to, and like I want to get those tattoos perfect. Like when I did the black and white version, I tried them one way. When I returned to the project digitally, as you see it here, I redid her tattoos, right? So it's an interesting thing to do like a very, high melanin content and then tattoo color over that. How would that look? I don't
Yeah.
know. That's the beauty of these kind of projects, because they allow me to mess around with this kind of problem solving, in my own time for my own pleasure without necessarily having to, do it for the sake of a client.
Yes. So anything to wrap it up?
Um,
Like, how would you sum it up?
oh, well, let's see if I can share a piece that I've never shared before. So this character, can you see, is that showing through? Yeah.
Wax.
War leader Spax shows up at the very end of the series, and he's such an annoying jerk. But there's something about him, his like cynicism and his warrior culture, and then the fact that when he wears his armor is made out of turtle shells. And then the fact that he paints his face white, so like there's this whole like subtle story of how his tribe maybe are emulating one of the other white-faced races that appear in the book. And I have this as a full body image that I've never been satisfied, so I've pretty much not shared. I shared it once, and I found it in the wild on like I think a German website, like the German Wikipedia page or the Japanese Wikipedia page for Malazan Book of the Fallen characters. So that was kind of fun. I don't know how that happened, but here it is. Another character that I would love to return to at some point, and really, I think he needs to be bulkier, and his hair needs to be bigger, and he just needs to look more. I don't know. Well, what do you think he looks like?
Captain Picard with a lot of hair.
See, too intellectual.
Too
He needs to be
intellectual.
more intimidating.
All right. Well, it's time for me to jet. But
all right. Well, so what are the
great.
chances that you'll be rereading this series, Donovan, on a scale of 1 to 10?
On a scale of 1 to 10, I don't know if I'm going to reread this series, but I might be inspired to dive into Shadows of the Moon and just see where it goes from there.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, I mean, it took me over a year of audiobooks to read it, but it's totally worth it.
Yeah,
I'm
well,
glad we could refresh here.
You're primed for the new series, which book 1 has come out, right? The God is Not Willing, which is the Karsa Orlong, colloquially known as the Karsa Orlong trilogy.
Yeah, I'll definitely be checking that out for sure.
All right. So. Well, I look forward to your video review of it.
All righty. Thanks, Patrick. It's been great.
Thank you, Donovan. This was a lot of fun.
All righty. We'll catch you later.
Talk soon.